Hi everybody, and Sin Soy, I wouldn't miss this for the world. It's going to be an amazing evening. Good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Now, let me tell you something, it's going to be an absolute cracker. But before we get into that, I just have some admin to clear. Lovely to see Mel here. Mel was the winner of the Leopard Big 5 painting, and that's in the mail to Mel. And this weekend, we're going to be auctioning this beauty. This is also one of the big 5. This is the rhino. And if you have a look behind me, let me get the right side. There we are. There you can see the rhino, there where my finger is. He is in every single video that I publish. So another iconic painting, also by that great artist Bonnie Hutt, who did the 5 for our show. And just for the record, we have a bid of 20,000 Rand already on that rhino painting before we even start. Just so you know the competition out there for these paintings. And of course, all money is going to charity. And when we're going to auction it, we're planning a live stream with Simon Ruet, whose rangers protect rhino in South Africa. And that'll be hopefully this weekend. Okay, now let's get to the subject of tonight's discussion, and that is about what the heck is going on with this coronavirus. And, you know, we were the first YouTube channel to really take this issue up seriously, especially in South Africa. And my older subscribers would be aware of this. None of the mainstream media in South Africa were going near the subject. They thought it was all going to go away. But I think our subscribers here are probably the best informed, which is the best thing to be, seeing that the coronavirus, as far as we know, is now actually in South Africa. And the cases I'm talking about were those in Mitchell Plain, and I reported on those yesterday. Now, let's have a bit of a listen to an update on what's going on with the coronavirus in South Africa, or around the world too. And then after that, we'll get Simon Roche from Suidlanders on. Okay, here we go.
The African government is on high alert this afternoon, going as far as evacuating locals trapped in China as the coronavirus spreads to almost 50 countries across the world. 2 South Africans working on a Japanese cruise ship have tested positive for COVID-19. Global markets are now plunging to unprecedented levels. The threat to Africa growing by the minute, with Nigeria confirming its first case. Of course, we're all over this story on The Lead. Let's get the latest from Michael Apple, Rupio Madzena, and Michael Marilia. Mike Apple, let's start with you. What do we know about the 2 South Africans who are confirmed to have contracted COVID-19?
So there were 12 South Africans working on board the Diamond Princess Japanese cruise liner. And there are 3,700 people on board that cruise liner, 705 confirmed cases, 2 South Africans, the other 10 are in the clear for the moment. They will undergo...
Okay, so there you heard it from the horse's mouth. Those 2 are definitely not in South Africa, they're in Japan, but you have got South Africans who have contracted the coronavirus outside of South Africa, and South Africans who reportedly are now infected with the coronavirus in South Africa. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Simon Roche online now, and he's going to be telling us what Suidlanders' plan is to do to actually help people once this coronavirus just goes completely feral in South Africa. And I have no doubt, when you consider the township situation where people live cheek and jowl and it's just ripe for infection across places like Soweto, Alexandra, and there's so many other townships we can talk about. But you don't want to hear me. I'm going to get Simon Roche on, so let's get the show on the road. Here we go. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Scott.
Good to have you on the show tonight, buddy.
Oh, thank you very much for having us, Scott.
It's an absolute pleasure. We've got about 250 people watching at the moment, which is a very good number at such an early stage in the show. Now, we're going to be talking about Suidlanders, which is an organization that this channel supports and has been supporting for a long time. And
Yes.
Suidlanders has some very interesting strategies on how to look after its members. Now, what we want to talk about tonight particularly is the coronavirus. And I guess the first question I have for you is, does Suidlanders have a plan for its members to get them out of danger's way? And secondly, what's like the trigger point where you tell people this is what you got to do?
Scott, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give a little introduction to this thing.
Please
Our
do.
national emergency plan is composed of 2 parts, 6 phases. Part 1 is phases 1, 2, and 3, and they are reversible. Part 2 is phases 4, 5, and 6, and they are irreversible. Very briefly, phase 1 of our national emergency plan is for people to gather in the vicinity of their residential area, to come together in the event of some crisis. It could vary in nature, obviously, and then to decide what to do. Are they going to stick around? Are they going to go back home? Are they going to meet tomorrow? Are they going to hang around in their cars for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours and see what happens? Phase 2 is the convoy procedure, the movement to phase 3. And phase 3 again is a point, it's a place, it's not a movement, and we often refer to it as a visvang plek. In other words, something akin to a campsite, perhaps 50 kilometers out of town, where you could hang around depending upon your supplies and provisions for a more or less indefinite period of time. A place where you can camp and cook and eat and do your bodily ablutions for a more or less indefinite period of time, waiting out a threat that may be present in your residential area. Phase 4 is when the national leadership, the entire national leadership, unanimously decides that there is nationwide anarchy and people should go to a permanent safe area, and I'll describe that in a minute's time. When they get there, that is phase 5. So that is the arrival in the safe area, or safe region, I should say. It is the processing of the people, and it is deploying them into roles and functions. Phase 6 is the establishment of a defensibility, a defensible capacity, putting up observation posts, digging toilet trenches, ensuring that the telephone system works, and the electrical grid, and the sewerage system, and establishing the logistics for the ingathering, the storage, and the distribution again of resources, particularly but not only food. So that system is clearly adaptable to a coronavirus crisis. We do not believe that the threat of the coronavirus, and you and I have discussed this, so I don't disagree with you, Scott. I'm just drawing a little distinction. We don't believe that the coronavirus threat is very great for our members for 2 reasons. The one is genetic. It has been reasonably proven now, and there are documents on the Pirbright Institute website that people can look at, that the virus affects more severely Black and Asiatic peoples. Which is not to say we're completely immune, but it is the first factor to consider. The second factor to consider is that our immune systems, on average, tend to be better. We tend to be better fed, and we have better access to medicine and so on. The threat, as we see it, is of it entering the poor Black populations of South Africa, and we believe that that could precipitate absolute anarchy. In which case, to get back to your question, and then I'll finish talking, in which case, people might go crazy. As it is, we have a massive population in South Africa that is underfed, poor, helpless, hopeless, lost, frustrated, angry. They are burning down schools and universities and municipal buildings and clinics left, right, and center across the country. And those people, if they feel that there is a tremendous threat to them, with their genetic predisposition and considering the high prevalence of AIDS and TB and other diseases and illnesses that depress your immune system, those people could go crazy because they're on the verge of it already. They're being driven mad. Circumstances in South Africa, and should that boil over, and should they start marauding through middle-class suburbs, then our plan clearly, the phases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is clearly adaptable to those circumstances.
Right. Now, let's take the coronavirus as a trigger for you to actually contact your members. At what point in time would you be saying to your members, hey, it's time to get the heck out of there and to go to a gathering point?
Our organization is very cellular. It's based upon 10 families makes a group. 10 groups make a region. 10 regions make a province. And we have 34 provinces across South Africa. So we would allow that decision to rest with the local cells, the families, the groups, the regions, and for people to decide for themselves whether they felt insecure in their suburbs or not. And if they wanted to go to their local gathering point, phase 1, or if they wanted to get into a convoy process out to the visvangplek, the fishing place, being phases 2 and 3, they may do so upon their own recognizance. Obviously, we would liaise with them. But if people said, we don't care what anybody thinks, we're afraid, we're going to the visvangplek to wait for 3 days, they're more than welcome to do so. The point at which we would be, let me say, I don't want to use the wrong word, but let me say autocratic about it, or dogmatic about it, or not dictatorial, but the point at which we would want the national leadership's voice to be heard would be if we were receiving reports from all over South Africa, 100 people killed in Westville outside Durban, 67 people killed in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg, for argument's sake, 138 people in Pretoria, and so on. Then we would say to people, look, we think you should get out of, let's say, a place like King Williamstown. I mean, it's not safe at the best of times. To the King Williamstown people and the people in the Eastern Cape and Natal, we might be saying to them, guys, we really think now is the time for you to get out.
Right. Now, Marlene has said, and hi Marlene, lovely to see you here, and Jaka, good to see you here. Marlene has said she had the problem with his son, trying to get him to prep. Tell us how important it is for people to prep right now in this window of opportunity.
You know, Scott, the window of opportunity is almost closing. I don't want to say something that will discourage and distress people, but we are now talking about moving from preparation to positioning. This is not official Suidlanders policy. We haven't given out a national directive or anything like that, but internally, within senior leadership, we are beginning to recognize that look, if I may use this kind of parable, to prepare for a first team rugby season, you do pre-season training and so on. But to position yourself for the match on Saturday morning, you wake up early, you go to your dad, you knock on the door, you say, Dad, I need a lift to the school. He takes you down, you get in the school bus, you drive to the other school, the host school, the home school, you get off the bus, you do some stretching, you warm up on the field, you go into the change room, you change, you go out onto the field. That is positioning. There is a valid distinction here. And we are at a point in time, Scott, where it's not too late to start preparing. But we are already at a point where we're saying to people, guys, you might want to think about positioning right now, ensuring that you have the stuff in place to move with, rather than seeing preparation as this kind of long-term thing, oh, one day I'll get there kind of thing. You should be there already. Let me put it to you this way, Scott. I would say to Marlene, and to her son, and to others, that it's not difficult to start prepping. To start prepping is easy. You can buy maize meal, 10 kilogram bag of maize meal at Macro for 60 Rand. And a large pot of maize meal, of mealie meal, of pap for 4 people comes out of a 250 ml coffee mug. Put in 250 mils, that will give you a pot to make. So in 10 kilograms, 250 mils, let's call it 250 grams. Of course, the specific gravity is not the same, but let's keep it simple. You're talking about 4 goes into it goes into a kilogram, 4 times a kilogram. So there you've already got 160 meals. 4 times 4 times 10. 160 starch meals to keep you going, to give you the energy to stay alive. For 60 bucks. It's not even money. To stockpile your first 100 liters of diesel may be intimidating because it's going to cost you 1,500 bucks and plus the canisters. But to do it over 3 or 4 months is really not a challenge. I'm not saying money grows on trees for poor people. I am saying that if you've got some mealie meal and you've got 1,500 bucks of fuel that you've accumulated over 6 months, you are now in a position to drive a long way. It's more than a tank of fuel. It's over 2 tanks of fuel for most small cars. And man, if you steal a knife out of your knife drawer, your kitchen knife drawer, you've got a little knife. You don't have to have a fancy backpack. I don't have a fancy backpack. If you watch some prepper program on YouTube and you think to yourself, gee, that guy's got fancy paracord. I can't afford paracord, so I got washing line stuff. It's never too late to prep, and prepping is not difficult. It really isn't difficult to get the basics in place. I hope that that's a kind of a helpful answer, Scott.
Certainly is. Now look, I'm just going to drop into the side chat Suidlanders, how to join Suidlanders if people watching want to. I would strongly suggest you have a plan B, because especially with the coronavirus, you've just heard what Simon's saying about how Suidlanders do have a plan for people. We've got close to 450 people watching at the moment. Now, there's something that you've just touched on, and I think it's going to be a huge secondary issue once the coronavirus really does get into the townships, and I have no doubt in my mind it's going to happen. It's a given.
Yes.
Just for the record, Australia has now recognized the coronavirus as a pandemic, which basically means...
I saw that on your channel, Scott.
Yeah. The Australian government have now said it's a pandemic. And they said last time with SARS, they were the first country to do that, and they were 10 days ahead of the rest of the field. And they're very proud of that little issue. Now, getting back to the situation with the townships, and things really start going pear-shaped. I mean, the anger that the black population have with the ANC cadres and the guys who work in the municipalities is palpable. I mean, as you said,
yes.
You look at what happened at Ladysmith in the last couple of days. I used to live near
Yes.
Ladysmith, and it used to be a beautiful little town, and I went through it in 2011, and oh my
Yes.
gosh, how it had changed. The Royal Hotel in Ladysmith, you literally had to barricade yourself in, and that was 8 years ago. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so let's take the situation where the black population starts going completely crazy.
Yes.
Would that be like a time when you would say to generally all the members, it's time to go to phase 4?
We may do, Scott. You know, it's the kind of thing that you have to get very, very right,
Yeah.
or you look very, very bad. You know, it's almost unfair. It's a bit like being a brain surgeon. You know, one slip and all of a sudden you're a very bad person kind of thing. So we are going to have to tread very, very cautiously in making that decision and making that call. But, you know, Scott, you doubtless know, I know your research is exceptional, it's incredible, it's enviable. You've probably seen that interview with the head of research of the French National Biological Institute or something like that, where the woman said that they had done modeling on which countries in the world were most vulnerable to a coronavirus outbreak.
Right.
Whether she meant vulnerable or susceptible, I think that it was vulnerable. In other words, if it comes in, it's going to be bad. And she said in the world, not in Africa, number 1, Egypt, number 2, South Africa, number 3, Nigeria. And that's horrifying. I mean, if we are the second most vulnerable country in the world, of 194 countries, depending upon what you recognize as a country, more or less 194 countries, it's mind-boggling, Scott.
Yeah.
It's absolutely mind-boggling. And these people are not non-partisan. They know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And we are in a situation now where there are, I can't say too much, Scott, but you can imagine for yourself that we do have quite good sources. And after you and I spoke this morning, South Africa time, just
Right.
as you were on your way to bed, Australia time, I placed a couple of phone calls to corroborate things that I'd heard, so that I didn't, proliferate fake news in this interview with you.
Right.
And I can tell you categorically, there is coronavirus in South Africa, and it's not, let me put it to you this way. I live in Van der Kloof, which is in the middle of nowhere. I think we have when everybody who lives here is here, we have 312 people living here. There are many people who own houses, but they're just holiday homes because we're on the second biggest dam in South Africa.
Right.
So 312 people. It's a tiny dorp in the middle of nowhere. And I can tell you categorically, I placed phone calls to people who know what they're talking about.
Right. Now,
and I got it from the horse's mouth. We've had coronavirus in our vicinity. I don't want to mention the town or the city or the province, but if we've had coronavirus near Van der Kloof, you can bet your very last dollar that it is already in Soweto or Alexandra. Now, obviously, this is speculation, but I think it's the speculation of a reasonable man. I don't think it's wild speculation. I don't think it's hysterical or neurotic or doomsaying or whatever. I think that I, as a reasonable human being, am perfectly entitled to make the assertion that if there have been diagnosed cases of coronavirus in the Northern Cape, in the middle of the desert, then there are most certainly cases of coronavirus in Johannesburg and Durban and places like that where there are large, poor populations that are exposed on an ongoing basis to the many Chinese traders who return to South Africa after the Chinese New Year. Not hundreds, not thousands, tens of thousands.
Yeah. Now, just for the record, I've asked Philippe to join us. He's our medical expert here on Loving Life. And Philippe, are you there?
Yes, I couldn't hear what went on before that. I could read the sidebar, but I was not getting any image or sound.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm not so sure what Simon. Hi, Simon. Good evening.
Hello, Philippe.
Now, Philippe, I don't see your camera. I just see your icon.
I'm not sure how good the link is at the moment, so I've actually switched the camera off and get better sound.
Okay, fair enough. Now, look, just to give you a bit of a summary about what we've been talking about, Philippe, and I've got to tell you, Simon, that a month ago,
yes,
I had a discussion with Philippe and Gerard, who's a fellow in a South African in China. And Philippe was the first person to suggest that vitamin C is a very good way of combating or stopping the virus from really hurting you. And he's got some ideas too on the best way to actually keep yourself safe. Now, Philippe, what we've been talking about here, I understand you couldn't hear, but what we're talking about here is how Suidlanders will help people get out of like towns and cities and into a safe area at a certain stage when the coronavirus starts hitting communities. Is that correct, Simon?
Yes, yeah, that's a fair summary.
Okay, Philippe, do you want to just pass a comment about that from a medical perspective?
Yes, by all means. To give you an idea as to what influenza do in the UK, I left South Africa a few years ago, and I'm in practice in the UK, in Scotland, and in Harley Street in London. The last flu season, which was last year, we had a death toll, which is the NHS, the National Health Service statistic, of between 10,000 and 30,000, 30,000. That is the NHS own number. What kind of statistic that is anyone's guess. Yeah, 10,000 or 10,500, I understand, but between 10,000 and 30,000 is odd. But that's what we've got, which means that we've had hundreds of thousands of people reporting to GP surgeries who were affected to get that number. And every year we have a large number of fatalities, which is pretty common for different influenza. And every so many years we get a particularly bad one. We've had SARS, we had MERS, we now have this one. Now, the people who are affected by influenza are chiefly people with underlying conditions who are already being treated for example, heart conditions, cardiac conditions, who are being treated for respiratory conditions, sometimes pretty severe ones, people who receive medication that suppresses the immune system one way or another, people who are elderly, very, very young ones as well, toddlers, babies, babies whose immune systems haven't quite formed yet. So that is a normal aspect. Now, in the case of the coronavirus, it particularly affects the respiratory system. The nasty bit about it is that it is underground for a couple of weeks. In other words, people shed, people are capable of spreading droplets with a viral load, a high viral load, and they attach themselves to the mucosae, the mucous membranes, eyes, nose, mouth, and that is how they enter. The ideal situation is to fortify your immune system as best you can. The other thing is to actually avoid areas where you might pick up infections from people around you, shopping centers, stores, airports, full buses, tubes, trains. And to that effect, the Chinese government had it pinned. They basically quarantined everybody to avoid spreading. So they quarantined Wuhan. Then within Wuhan, they quarantined suburbs, and within the suburbs, they quarantined streets and they quarantined buildings. So they contained the prospects of cross-infection. And that was right on the money. It was, in some eyes, a bit of a cruel situation, but it is the best system there is, and it worked. What I don't understand is why you would want to leave the relative safety and whatever it has to offer in terms of medical support of a town or a city and head for a camp in the bush somewhere. I don't understand that, because if you are affected, a large number of people will be affected and show very few symptoms, if any, or very mild symptoms. It is the ones that show very severe symptoms and have complications who are at risk of becoming a fatality, the statistic. And those people need very specialized care. They need mechanical respirators and people who are capable of operating them, and they need hydration, they need suction equipment. In other words, they need a hospital environment or an advanced treatment facility that might be an army base with a whole bunch of medics. But
sorry,
you need equipment and you need infrastructure.
Philippe?
Sorry?
Philippe,
yes.
Unfortunately, what you're talking about here, South Africa does not have. Its public health system is a disgrace. In an ideal situation like Australia, it would work, but in South Africa,
no,
there's no support.
What I'm saying is, such as it is better than having none at all. And if you're in a position to get private medical support, you have your nurses there, you have medics, you have some type of facility. Some of the hospitals are actually still okay. You might be able to get assistance from the armed forces, the medical services, such as it is, as poor and corrupt and messed up as it is better than what you're going to receive in a tented camp.
Okay,
now,
I think
my problem is that once you are out of your cocoon, once you're out of your home, and if there is an infection rate in your city or in your province, in your city, in your suburb, the safest place to be is actually in your home and close the doors, close down everything, and basically button up until it has passed. To go into an environment where you've tents and caravans, where you have to share a water supply, where you have to share sewage supply, sewage service, one way or another. It has been discovered in feces as well. The virus has been identified in feces. To my mind, defeats the purpose of containing it. Your first situation target is not to get it in the first place and to contain it, not to let anybody into your home, to maintain very strict hygiene within your home. Should someone get sick, have a special room reserved for them where they can get better, but shield yourself from your environment. To actually get out of town and take elderly people and take children with you who are most at risk should they be infected. And being infected is one thing, but if they should get complications, you don't want them in the bush. You want them near a facility such as it may be, whatever it has to offer. And to take them out of that environment into an environment where there is no quarantine possibility, no isolation possibility, is completely counterproductive and puts you hugely at risk.
Okay, now
children will
Philippe,
around and play, and
Philippe,
I would suggest that you stay put.
Philippe,
Yes.
let me talk. Now, what I see here is a situation where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I'll tell you what I mean here. When you take a community out of the city, and let's say things go absolutely anarchistic in the city because of the coronavirus just taking over, you're going to have homes being raided by gangs. So in that scenario, there's a very high chance that if you're in a house somewhere in a city or a town, your house is going to be raided, and that's basically a death sentence. That's why I say you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. With the other scenario, which is what Suidlanders are suggesting, yes, there's a possibility of the coronavirus breaking out amongst that community. Now, Simon, I want you to talk to this question with Philippe. You raised that genetically the white population have a stronger resistance to the coronavirus than the Asians and the blacks. Now, that kind of sort of supports the idea of getting that community out. Now, can you speak to both the damned if you do and damned if you don't scenario?
I think, Scott, that it's important. I wouldn't like to hold the sort of conversation that we held a year ago, where we just went around and around and around in circles, and every response was, was selective to what I was saying. It really is very tiring and quite unfair. So I'm going to say this once and once only to Philippe. We are not saying that people should run away from the coronavirus. We are saying, should it happen that the coronavirus precipitates anarchy? In fact, I'll say it twice. We are saying, if the coronavirus precipitates anarchy and there is a direct threat to life and limb, then we have a plan to remove people from that circumstance of anarchy.
So as I understand it, Scott and Simon, the evacuation is based on anarchy and not necessarily on avoiding infection of the coronavirus.
Absolutely, yes. We are absolutely not offering a solution to get people away from the coronavirus. Number one, we don't have the means. We would be dragging people into the middle of nowhere. We wouldn't have masks. I mean, just buying the mask, can you imagine for 100,000 people? Where would any organization that was not part of the United Nations, that did not have a state sponsor, where would any organization find such money? Never mind tents, never mind respirators, never mind sleeping bags, never mind nothing. We have no medical capacity to treat or to deal with or to handle or to cope with the coronavirus. And we are not pretending to do so. We are saying, if there should be anarchy in South Africa, as a direct consequence of an outbreak of coronavirus, which precipitates anger and frustration amongst people who are already angry and frustrated and who are already venting that anger and frustration, then it may be the best solution by far to remove yourself from that clear and present danger. But until such time as we're at that point, until such time as, for example, houses in suburbs are being firebombed, as they were not so long ago in northern Natal, in traditionally white suburbs. Until such time, our national emergency plan is irrelevant. If I may, I beg your pardon for hogging the microphone here, but I think this is a pertinent opportunity to mention something else. Not to digress, but to give a sense of context. We believe, rightly or wrongly, but it is our conviction, having invested a lot of time and research and consultation with experts worldwide on this, including foreign authorities, that the far greater threat to stability in South Africa this year is the cascading effect of a severe crash in the United States economy. As I said, I don't want to digress off of tonight's topic, but I want to provide a sense of context. We believe that the coronavirus, yes, it's probably here. No, it's probably not going to have a meaningful effect on our people unless things transpire the way that Scott has postulated. Quite fairly. Scott's postulate is fair. It just happens to be our opinion that what is more likely to precipitate a substantial breakdown in the law and order of South Africa is a massive economic crisis. It's very dependent on commodity exports to China, our entire economy. It is the lifeblood of our economy. And with that in mind, again, we don't have a plan to dish out money to people if they're unemployed. Our plan is, should there be such a critical collapse of anarchy, means without rule or without law, like an archbishop is the boss of the bishops. Arch means authority, above, and means without. In a circumstance where the rule of law has broken down in South Africa, we have a plan. We don't have a plan to dish out food to people who lose their jobs, nor do we have a plan to dish out masks to people who get ill.
Simon? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Philippe, I think that what Simon's saying makes a lot of sense, because what he's saying in effect is that people might go to a camp with the coronavirus, but because they've got supplements and because they've taken better care of themselves, hopefully for most people it won't be a there he is. Hi Philippe, good to see you. But
I think it's pretty stable, the internet. We've had problems here.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
let's try this. But if it fails, I'll go back to microphone only.
Okay, but I think that what Simon's saying, as a clarification, that if things go totally anarchistic in the areas where they have members, and houses are being firebombed, and that little isolation area or quarantine area you're talking about comes under threat, even if people do have the virus, at least they can save their lives and get the heck out of the situation. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, basically the agenda on which I joined has changed, because I understood that the agenda was if there is a corona epidemic and Simon and the Suidlanders will evacuate people because of the epidemic out of town. That is what I basically understood was going to be the agenda. The agenda really is, from Simon's point of view, and I can find no fault with it, that they, in the first place, have no medical facilities to offer whatsoever. They have no medical expertise. They have no supplies. There is no logistics. He does not say that at the safe places there will be any kind of supplies, logistics, or expertise available. It is simply a matter of getting out of town if that is your choice. And you want to get out of town because there is mayhem, not necessarily because there is a pandemic on the go. So that is a very different point of departure. And Simon and I differ. I think it would be wiser to stay where you've got the infrastructure than to get out of Dodge. But we differ, and so be it. I respect Simon's views there. From a point of view of what I joined for was, is it wise to get out of town if there is a pandemic? My view is clearly no, and Simon basically supports that by saying, guys, if the lesser prejudice is to come to a safe place well out of town, and you take the risk of getting sick and no support because you rate your chances better if you do get out of town than when you stay in town, so be it. I understood that I had to give a view as to whether it would be wise to evacuate a town because of a pandemic. The motivation here is if there is anarchy and murder, rape and mayhem. That is a very different perspective. My view is that I don't think that we will see that because of the coronavirus. We may see it for a number of other reasons, such as what Simon just brought up, or if there is a complete economic collapse in South Africa, or whatever the effects may be of the rating that is coming up. The rand is going one way. If there is going to be massive unemployment and even further collapse of infrastructure and resulting unhappiness and violent reactions, that's a different story altogether.
Okay.
From a point of view of what is your best option if there is a pandemic, and a pandemic only, I would say stay at your house, lock it down. If it is that bad, lock it down and sit it out. Yeah, don't go into an environment where you get infected and there is absolutely, as Simon bears out, that's not their raison d'être.
Okay,
it's not their reason to
Philippe, can I?
That's a different motivation altogether. I can't find, if that is what your choice is, I can't find fault with that, but not to avoid a pandemic.
Okay, now Philippe, I just want to say that it's been so important that we've had this discussion, because basically what we've clarified here is that A, you both agree that the solution that Suidlanders have is correct, and B, that what Suidlanders' position is that it's when things become anarchistic, maybe as a result of the coronavirus, or maybe because the economy's tanked, that's the time that people will be invited to move out of their town or their city. Is that correct, Simon?
That is correct. The exception, of course, would be, and I would understand if Philippe disagreed with this, I would probably disagree with it myself, but there is an exception worth noting, and that is where people, upon their own recognizance, employing the Suidlanders plan, which is written down, it's developed, it's been thought out, so it's logistically tenable for the average person. You know, it's like following a recipe. The average person might say, I have a recipe book, being the Suidlanders National Emergency Plan, I believe that I am not ill, rightly or wrongly, foolishly or wisely, it doesn't matter. These are human beings that we are dealing with. I believe that I am not ill and my family is not ill. Therefore, I and my buddy down the road, fellow Suidlander who thinks like I do, are going to move out of the suburb because we, in our infinite wisdom, disagree with Dr. Philippe about remaining locked up in our homes. Whether it's right or wrong is quite besides the point that I am making. What is the point that I am making? I am making the point that there will be those exceptions, possibly, where people in their own, upon their own recognizance, get it into their heads that they don't want to be in a place where there are lots of germs and they'd rather be in the bushveld. That is bound to happen. It's inevitable. We would be bull dusting one another if we pretended that it wouldn't happen. We are dealing with human beings, which is a subject that Suidlanders, with all due respect, is very well versed in.
Yeah. Life is a choice, and I have certain issues with what I heard a while ago when Simon and I had a discussion. I would not follow the Suidlander model. I wouldn't, but that is a personal choice. I made a very different choice because I left South Africa in 2008, so it's immaterial. But I visit South Africa every year, twice. Should I be caught up in the thing, I still have to make a decision there in any event. But life is a choice. If you feel that your chances are better in an encampment than in the sanctity of your own home, where you can shut your doors and keep everybody out, to ride out the infection wave, so be it. It's a personal choice. Mine is containment.
Philippe, can I ask you a question?
In China, the model has worked in Japan. The model has worked actually everywhere, and it is virtually the only way to seal it off. If it comes to a wave of utter lawlessness and violence, I think in a way it might be easier to do that. That's where you've got your Boerenregion model and a Dexter model, where they seal off streets rather than get out of town. Again, that is a choice and a personal preference. Mine is not to get out of a place where I could be jammed up in traffic and a lot of other problems, and not move an inch and be subject to problems.
Philippe,
but it is a personal choice.
Philippe,
it's a personal choice.
Philippe,
yes.
I'm just going to interrupt.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, now, I understand your position on that. What I really want to concentrate on now is something slightly different, and I want to pose this to Simon. Simon, we're talking about South Africa going to a stage of anarchy, and we've got
yes.
we've got towns where we've got Boerenregion are going to be basically protecting their little community, which is their model. Now,
yes. Yes.
Now, in a case where South Africa does break down to anarchy, okay, this is again just looking a bit further ahead. The ANC government are such a complete disaster anyway. There won't be a government in South Africa. It'll just be complete chaos. Isn't that a time for the bigger groups like Suidlanders, like Boerenregion, like ULA, Dexter, whatever, for them to actually somehow work together, even if it's loosely, and then establish a part of South Africa? Everybody talks about secession. Wouldn't that be the time to actually draw a line in the sand and say, this is the area we're going to defend because we don't want the coronavirus to come and break into our area, and then just basically cement that area down? What are your thoughts on that, Simon?
We're not averse to that, Scott. The problem is that our doctrines diverge so radically that they're irreconcilable. Let me give you an example. Boerenregion want to get buses and to seal off suburbs. But if there is a threat, that threat is going to turn off the incoming water supply to that suburb. Not maybe, not could be, not possibly, not perhaps. They will do it. Therefore, remaining in your suburb is from the get-go hopelessly unfeasible. Only a dumb person would opt for that. And that, let me not say anymore, but we have grave reservations about where that philosophy originated. It is deliberately intended to mislead. There are, oh dear me, so there are things that I'm biting my tongue from telling you. We have access to highly privileged information.
Right.
This is not speculation on my part.
Right.
Right. So that's a non-starter. The ULA wishes to secede what you might loosely call the Old Cape from South Africa, using as its eastern border the Great Fish River, which was the border that the Xhosas asked for, and which was granted to them by the whites in a treaty in 1795. The Xhosas then repeatedly broke the treaty. There's no historian that disputes that. Where there is dispute is whether the retaliation of the whites was fair and good and just. But the treaty was repeatedly broken by the Xhosas. Nevertheless, that is the historical boundary between the Bantu peoples of South Africa and the whites and the Griqua and the Topnar and the I don't like to use the word San because it's a name given by the Bantu people to the Bushmen, and it means robbers. It's a very politically correct but extremely pejorative term. It's a despicable word. And the Khoi people, right? The first Xhosa people and the first whites, in the form of Captain Robert J. Gordon, who was a Scotsman working for the Dutch East India Company. He was the commander of the fort in Cape Town, met on the east bank of the Great Fish River at modern-day Somerset East. So there is a profound historical justification for that particular border that the ULA is proposing. However, the ULA, and this is not hearsay, really, I know what I'm talking about, because we've been told this to our faces by the most senior people in the ULA. The ULA's specific plan, the story about the 2024 election is a red herring. It is a straw man argument. It is false. Their specific plan is to wait for a civil war to break out in South Africa and then to immediately secede, using us as a buffer between them and the government forces / the forces of the revolution / the marauding hordes. Now, it goes without saying that we have a massive problem with that. They told us this to our faces. We believe as much as you do that there's going to be a civil war. We're not a Christian organization. We don't believe in the prophecies of Wilmsina and Rensburg, but we know that there's going to be a civil war, and we are being backed by foreign governments. They are very strong. They are very powerful. They are very jacked up. But again, their philosophy, their doctrine diverges irreconcilably from ours. However, there are other organizations whose names I would prefer not to mention for obvious reasons here, with whom we have been treating for a long time, who are specific intent upon participating in our national emergency plan. They disagree with us here, they disagree with us there. We're Methodist, they're Presbyterian, we both believe in this, but we don't believe in. So what we have agreed with them is that where we believe that they are reliable and they have good capacity. We're not just talking about, blowhards. We're talking about serious organizations with good planning, good training, good capacity. We have said to them, all right, if you want to retain a modicum of autonomy, you don't want to fall under us, but you want to collaborate with us, then why don't you take, let's say, defensive perimeter, for want of a better word. Why don't you take the area between here and here? You've got 200 men. You can occupy this, let's say, for argument's sake, 20-kilometer stretch. And we have reached a lot of accord with such people. Scott, what you're talking about is absolutely correct. You are right. We're not saying that we're right and you're wrong. You are right, Scott. It should be a time in which people come together and act in unison and put aside their differences. But some of their doctrines are absolutely irreconcilable to the fundamental tenets of our plan. So, Boerelegioen and ULA are completely out of the window. But there are many others whose names I prefer not to mention who are not. I don't deal with them. It's not my job. It's not my work. But every other week I hear about, my relevant peers in the organization, senior people. We met with so-and-so. We met with so-and-so. We met with so-and-so. So there is an increasing amount of, let's say, intent to collaborate, as you are so rightly advocating, Scott.
Right. Now, Philippe, I want to address a question to you. You're the medical expert. Now, let's look at the situation where the coronavirus gets into a township. Let's say like Soweto. Describe to us what its impact is going to be on the people living in that township. Hi, Philippe, I can't hear you. There's no audio.
Your mic's off, I think, Philippe.
Your mic's off, Philippe. I'll just keep talking, I'll tell you when it's on. No, there's no audio. Philippe, look, how about, I'll just get Philippe back into the conversation. Oh, here we go. Philippe, you there?
Philippe, so tap the little microphone icon at the bottom of the screen. It's counterintuitive. It looks like you're turning it off, but you're in fact turning it on.
Yeah, it's showing his mic is off. Okay, just while Philippe is sorting that out, Simon, what are your predictions, or what are your thoughts about what will happen in the townships when this virus just starts going right through it like a plague?
You know, Scott, the premise of this conversation is so valid. What you said to me this morning in the introduction you gave to your viewers. In a population of people living cheek by jowl with suppressed immune systems as a result of TB and AIDS and what have you, Dr. Mark, oh dear me, what is his name? In fact, he's a full professor. Professor Dr. Mark, oh gracious me, I can't think of his surname, revealed at the 14th AIDS conference in November 2017, I believe, that 19% of there's almost 1/5 of all of the world's AIDS cases are in South Africa. So the true extent of this thing is phenomenal. Last year, the Department of Statistics, this is a very little known thing, Scott, and I think you'll find it fascinating. The Department of Statistics and the South African Social Security Agency released a joint report on the functioning, or the achievements, let's say, of the the SASA agency. And it was revealed through the simple arithmetic that the population of South Africa, far from being 59, 60 million, is in fact 85. They really slipped up. The government slipped up massively in revealing the true population of South Africa inadvertently like that.
85 million?
It was brought to my attention. 85 million, yeah.
Wow.
Scott, can you hear me again?
Philippe, I can.
You can't dispute it.
Philippe, give us a second. We I'll call you in and we'll raise that question again. Sorry, carry on, Simon.
Can you hear me? That's all I want to know. Can you hear me again?
We can.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry, mate. Just checking.
Okay, go ahead,
So
Simon.
when you have 85 million people, or the vast majority of 85 million people, let's call it 70 million people, for argument's sake, living in squalor, once it hits, as this woman, the head of research at the French National Biological Research Foundation, said, the three most vulnerable countries in the whole world will be Egypt, South Africa, and Nigeria.
Right.
And she said it, I'm sure, for very good reason. They're very clever people.
Yeah.
Once it hits South Africa, Scott, it is going to, people are going to be very afraid, and sometimes fear translates to anger, particularly when there are children involved. If you're the head of a household in which children are ill, you're liable to act aggressively. It seems almost beyond dispute to say that reasonably, we don't know, we don't have a crystal ball, we're not clairvoyant, but reasonably speaking, there is liable to be a massive outbreak, massive, meaningful, huge outbreak of anger, and it will be vented at two primary targets, inevitably. Number one, the authorities, the people who are supposedly letting them down. And number two, to the wealthy who appear to be immune to the thing.
Right.
And there is a natural human inclination. You may know the story, Scott, of certain breakthroughs. I can send you links if you're interested. Very, very, very interesting story. Certain breakthrough in medicine that were made in the USA in the 80s, where researchers began to pick up for the first time in an incontrovertible, an indisputable way, that black people react differently to certain medicines. And the black organizations of the USA tried to suppress that. In other words, they didn't want the medical industry in the USA to prescribe different medicine to blacks as to whites. They didn't want this scientific discrimination. They would rather have people die than have this concept enter the mainstream of social understanding. If black people in South Africa see that it's only black people getting ill, or it's overwhelmingly black people getting ill, and the racist whites, the well-off whites, the apartheid whites are still in the pound seats while they're sucking the hind tit.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to go. Yeah, I'm going to go address something to Philippe now. Philippe, you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can indeed. Now, Philippe.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've got two questions for you, and I think the one that's just come through, it actually came through on Facebook. I don't know how, but anyway. The fellow said, what are the chances of transmission of the virus by flies? In other words, or mosquitoes, flies, whatever. And the second question I want you to look at here is, how vulnerable are the townships to the coronavirus, and what impact is it going to have on those communities?
Well, the transmission at the moment is limited to droplet infection and aerosol infection, and there are a couple of instances where the virus has actually become airborne. It mutates all the time, which means that the finding of a vaccine and mass vaccination, which is what you might want to apply to a township population, is going to be extremely difficult, because the one that you tested in your human trials may be not valid anymore with the mutated version of the virus that you're trying to protect people against.
Right.
So from that point of view, the transmission is still a human transmission. Well, we've had from animals to humans, and now it is droplet infection. What I think is going to happen in townships is, again, the model that has been applied everywhere, which is the only way to do it, unfortunately at the moment, which is isolation, trying to contain.
How are you going to do that
infections
in a township where you've got three families living together in a tiny little metal shack?
It's still got to be done, because there is, if you can't corral people, if you can't isolate little groups and make sure that if there is going to be an infection, it will be contained. There will be people who will be infected and people who may succumb, but you try and limit the export of the virus
But
as much as you can. Now, my question is, how the hell are you going to do it in a township?
Exactly.
When I lived in South Africa during what was called a low-intensity civil war that was declared by P.W. Botha at the time, from 82 onwards. I served in the South African Police Reserve, and I've been in and out of townships, and I've done a couple of things as part of the Police Reserve. Now, the one thing is that, yes, there were hotheads, and there were aggressive types, and there were criminals, and very nasty types, but the greater majority of, and that is where you and I differ, Scott, at this point. My belief is that the greater majority of middle-class blacks and black people who have jobs and are raising families are not violent. They weren't then, when they had every reason to be, because they were fighting apartheid and a lot of other things. They didn't want to know anything about fighting the authorities, and I don't think they have really changed. I don't believe that we're going to get 45 million black people paying for our blood. We might get a couple of thousand doing it, or 10,000, maybe 20,000 nationwide if you can muster that many. But I don't believe that it is going to be running into millions by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
They're going to try and keep their jobs, they're going to try and keep their families alive, and if we start telling them that hygiene, because hygiene is the one thing that will save their bacon, that hygiene, and more hygiene is going to limit exposure, it is going to protect their immune systems such as they are. There are going to be people with depressed immune systems, and which is caused by medication, which is caused by underlying conditions, underlying pathologies. You're going to have those. But people are going to try and survive this, and they're going to do what you tell them to do, which is clean their dwellings, clean their keep their children clean, keep themselves clean as best they can. And again, try and contain it by keeping the healthy people together and dealing with the ones that are not. People want to survive, they don't want to fight. I don't know what, and that is where my main question comes in. People talk about logistics, and experts are the ones who will mention logistics. And South Africa is a logistical nightmare at the moment because it has been plundered to extinction. The services available in townships are a logistical nightmare because they don't exist anymore. They've been plundered, they're gone, it's over. And the fight against disease, against the pandemic, and the fight against poverty, and the fight against political instability is going to be fought and won on logistics. And those logistical aspects are gone. And that is my major problem with trying to keep people in the townships alive. We don't have medication anymore in the clinics. We don't have medication anymore in hospitals. The hospitals have been plundered. I've seen footage where beds in hospitals were in fact being sold off as scrap metal. The quality, and that is again a logistical aspect. How effective is a nurse? How effective is a doctor? How effective is a radiographer? That is a matter of training, and all of that goes back to again that logistical aspect. What can you deliver of what is needed with what you have? And that aspect is a nightmare at the moment. And the only logistical aspect that you can count on is the micro, is the nano, micro, pico, whatever aspect of logistical delivery, which is the family, the mother looking after kids, the father looking after kids, keeping things clean, trying to keep healthy food on the table, hand hygiene.
Okay, now Philippe, I just want to
obeying the authorities when they say don't go out of your suburb, don't leave your street, one member per family may go and get food every second day. As long as they observe the authorities with a tried and proven model, it's the best we've got.
Philippe, can I just interrupt at this stage? Philippe,
we have a nightmare.
Philippe,
yes.
Can I interrupt? Okay, now look, just for the record, we have about 550 people watching at the moment. Now, what I want to talk to you about, because you're talking about a perfect situation or a perfect scenario where the black population in townships are aware about what they should be doing when this coronavirus hits them. Now, the problem is that the South African public health systems apparently is calling it swine flu. So they're not even calling it the coronavirus, because there have been cases of people who've have died, and they said, oh, that was the swine flu. So it's like with AIDS. In South Africa, in the public health system, a lot of the AIDS deaths are claimed to be TB or something else. So they kind of try and steer it away from the actual reason that those people got the secondary disease like TB. Now, that is the truth of the matter. Now, my question, Philippe, is that if
Scott,
you look at...
I'm so sorry. I beg your pardon. I apologize.
Yeah.
Can I give you an anecdote very briefly?
Sure.
Which may be useful to the point that you are busy making.
Yep, go ahead.
I told you that I placed some phone calls this morning to research things that we'd heard, and I ended up speaking with a man who would know. And it is a matter of fact, because he was involved, that doctors have received patients whom they believe to have coronavirus. I can refer to one specifically, who returned from Wuhan 3 weeks ago. The week before last, he presented symptoms and went to the doctor, and the doctor said, look, I don't know, I'm not a coronavirus expert, but it seems clear to me you have every symptom of coronavirus and you have just come from Wuhan.
Right.
The doctor phoned the Department of Health in Bloemfontein and said, I have what I believe to be a coronavirus patient here. What must I do? And the Department of Health said to him, and I verified this from the horse's mouth this morning, the Department of Health said to him, we are not testing, we are not handling this, we will not, we shall not, we cannot, thank you, goodbye. Which I believe endorses the point that you've just made around whether people will even know. That there seems to be a clear policy by the South African government not to test people coming off planes, and for the Department of Health not to address the incipient epidemic in South Africa. At some point they're going to have to do something, even if it is publicly acknowledged that they are doing nothing. But for now, they are doing nothing at all, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
Excuse me for interrupting.
No, that's fine. You've added me to
the...
Hang on, Philippe. I've got a question for you, Philippe. Okay. Now...
Yeah, I just want to answer something here.
Yeah, no, just in a second, otherwise I'm going to forget. Philippe, let me... Then you can respond. Philippe, now, you mentioned about the black population in the townships having to, above all, have a very clean environment. One of the issues I have is the South African mainstream media. They are not talking about the coronavirus, but when they do, it's very flippant. It's about, oh, there have been cases in this country and that country, and there's now one in Nigeria and another one in Algeria, but they're not saying to people, you've got to start getting hand sanitizers. You've got to start making sure your little house in the township is clean. They're not giving any advice at all. So when this thing breaks out, they're giving no advice at all. So when this thing breaks out, it's going to be a shock to these people because they don't know what to do. This is the point I'm trying to make, Philippe. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Now, in the first place, to answer that previous question when Simon cut in, which is okay with me.
Yeah.
is you don't die of coronavirus. You die of asphyxia. You die of cardiac arrest. Yeah, when you have AIDS, you do not die of HIV/AIDS. You
It's
die
a secondary
of asphyxia.
disease.
You don't stop breathing.
Yeah.
That is what will be on the death certificate anywhere in the world. The cause of death is not coronavirus. It is not AIDS. So, as far as that is concerned, the way it is documented is the way it's the standard way of filling in death certificates. Yeah, it's as simple as that. Now, the coronavirus can only be identified and diagnosed as such after testing. The fact that there is the new, the novel corona 2019 is not a reason for any other strain of influenza or any other pathogen to stop acting. They are as active as ever. Yeah, it is just that there is a new boy on the block as well. It has not moved any of the others completely out of the way, and that's the only one left standing. There is a large variety of pathogens, streptococcus, pneumonia, and they are all doing their number, and they cause respiratory infections. They will keep on going, and to actually start calling every single person with pneumonia or bronchitis a corona victim is inaccurate. It is silly as well. However, and here I side with if what Simon tells me and tells us is what he has been told is true. That is irresponsible to the nth degree, and how a medical faculty which teaches the subjects cannot get involved and say, guys, stop this. Epidemiology is alive and well in South Africa, and there's some very, very good faculties around, and how they tolerate this conduct is beyond me. My biggest problem is if there is no plan, no stuff that has been printed already, nothing that is ready for transmission on TV and on the radios. The townships have a very active radio listening population. Teaching people in schools, teaching community leaders what to do should it come here. The infection rate of corona is not that different from any other virus. That's what I told you before. Every season we've got hundreds of thousands of people who are affected with seasonal flu, the strain of seasonal flu of the day.
Yeah.
We have NHS in a first world country between 10,000 and 30,000 deaths just from a seasonal flu. That is not going to stop.
Philippe, how about the comment I made about the lack of responsibility of the mainstream media in informing people how to best protect themselves, especially those in the townships? They have no idea.
That I think it is actionable. It is totally irresponsible. I don't understand why the national TV media don't do anything about it and the radio stations don't do anything about it. That is utterly irresponsible. The schools should be involved as well, and reach families that way. But there must be a distinction between causing a major panic wave and preparation for a very potentially damaging strain of influenza. This is not a once in a lifetime occurrence. We get these different strains of coronaviruses, the negative transcriptive RNA viruses. Every couple of years there is one which is nastier than the others. And in between we get ones that are unpleasant and have victims. What I want to try and avoid is panic awareness, caution, lifestyle changes, yes. Panic is utterly destructive and it achieves very little. So panic in people are going to get sick, and the sick ones, the really sick ones, are not the ones that are going to burn down houses. They will be in their beds.
Yeah.
Panic and panic mongering doesn't help. Please see it in context that this is one of many, many pathologies with which people present day in, day out in any surgery.
Well, the best way to stop panic, Philippe, the best way to
stop respiratory stories, and they're not related to corona.
Philippe,
they are similar.
Philippe, the best way to prevent panic is by informing people the best way to protect themselves, and they are not doing that in South Africa. That's my point. Now, there's another.
That is a valid point, and it is actionable. That is very poor and irresponsible.
Now, there's another point I want to raise with you, Philippe, and that's you said earlier that the way that the coronavirus is actually transmitted is through the air with little droplets. I understand that. I've seen videos where in China, people with the coronavirus actually coughing deliberately on the little buttons in the lift, because apparently if I then go and touch that button after someone's coughed on it and they've got the coronavirus, the transmission isn't through the air, but it's actually from a surface to my finger. And then if I put my finger to my mouth or to my nose or to my eye, I am then infected. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
That is correct, and the general lifespan of a virus on a surface was up to about 3 days in general terms. What they've picked up now through the adaptations and mutations of the virus is that this particular strain can remain active on the surface up to 24 days, and now perhaps even longer. So if you touch that thing, if you touch that button, which is why I said before in our first interview that bottles and tins and boxes, anything that comes into your house, once there is a bad outbreak of corona, should be wiped down.
Okay, now let me on that very point, Philippe. On that very point. Now, what's the situation, Philippe?
Your nose and your mouth and your eyes.
Philippe,
you infect yourself.
On that very point, imports coming from China now, post the arrival of the coronavirus, you're talking about an extended period of time that the coronavirus can live on a surface. Now, surely, if China is flying something into South Africa from, let's say, Wuhan, and one of the people, the handlers, have got the coronavirus, that could bring the virus into South Africa.
It's not only the handlers at the airport, it is the manufacturers. If on the assembly lines in the manufacturing process, someone is infected and may have just a very simple, non-threatening common cold, because they don't develop serious symptoms. It's one of those where you have very mild symptoms.
Right.
They're just as infectious as someone who is at death's door. Now, if they infect packaging or items, and you touch those, there is a viral load there. You touch those, you touch your mouth, your eyes, or your nose. That is how it makes its entry. You will be infected. So I think that in China, a lot of the factories have shut down for that reason. And that is why I say that should there be a problem with a pandemic, you should wipe down every single damn thing that you bring into your home.
Right.
The virucidal with chlorine, wipe it down. So what comes into your home comes into, let's call it, it's not sterile, but an aseptic, an infection-controlled environment. Nothing comes into your home until it's cleaned and cleared. Because of this longevity, this 24 days plus survival rate of the pathogen, of the virus. That is why supermarkets, where people cough and you have a 10-foot radius for spray and it lands on boxes, it is potentially hazardous. Wipe it down when it comes home. The stuff on a trolley that you push, once it's on your fingers, you touch your mouth, you touch your nose, you rub your eyes, you are at risk of infection. And that longevity is actually a new development. Right. It was about 3 days. It's now up to 24, and the latest reports are that it could actually last longer.
Wow.
It's all hygiene related. And it's not only China. We now have manufacturing plants in Italy, which are suspect, where corona virus has been present, and that stuff has been flown around all over the place, and that is within Europe.
Yeah. Now I'm going to just address a question, Philippe. Yeah. I'm just going to address a question to those watching. We got well over 500 people watching at the moment. If you want to post questions in the side chat, I'm now going to start taking questions and direct them to either Simon or Philippe. Now, I've got a question here for Simon, and the question is, firstly, thank you for your perspective concerning what you believe the greater threat could be. Do you believe that holding funds in dollars is very risky right now?
Oi, Scott. I think you're dead set on causing trouble tonight. Look, I'm going to give you a
it's not my question.
Personal perspective. Huh?
It's not my question. It's one of those in the side chat.
You chose that one. Scott, this is a very, very, very sensitive subject, and we have addressed it in the past, recent past, and it has elicited some very strident, fearful responses. Sorry, I see something changed on my camera. I don't know what happened there.
You look fine.
Scott, okay. Scott, I'm going to give you my opinion. This is not Suidlanders' policy, and Suidlanders doesn't have a defined policy on this because it is a very, very, very tricky area.
Right.
About in August of 2018, we were approached by one of our members who is a very well-versed guy in the field of economics and finance. And he said to us, you must start watching what is happening in the global financial markets because a collapse is inevitable.
Glenn, you can sign up there. That seriously. Sorry, carry on. I just said, Glenn said, how do I sign up to Suidlanders? So I've put a link there for him. Okay, carry on.
We didn't take it all that seriously because it's not our game. However, at the beginning of August last year, in other words, exactly a year later, we began to look into the stuff more and more and more and more closely, to the point where I now do about 8 hours of research a day on it, every single day, including weekends. Some people are going to hate what I'm about to say, but the simple reality is that a price to earnings ratio on a technical stock listed in the USA of 193, a price to earnings ratio of 193 is sheer madness.
It's crazy.
And exactly. And the stock exchange being where it is now, or rather the indices being where they are now, make no sense. They make no sense by any historical standard.
Yeah.
Therefore, we believe, there's a lot more I could say, but I don't want to talk for half an hour on one subject. We believe that there's a likelihood that there will be a massive, people are talking about, there's a very famous guy called Scott Minerd. He's a billionaire twice over, not because he has $2 billion, but because he made $4 or $5 billion by the age of 37, retired for 20 years, lived in a shack on the beach, and at the age of 57 came back and he's now made another $9 billion.
Wow.
Today in an interview with CNBC, he said the stock market crash that began on Monday is the biggest event in his lifetime. Wow. Ray Dalio, who is the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, said at the Davos meeting in Switzerland in January, cash will be worth nothing in 2020.
It's fiat
and the
money.
People interviewing him, they fell out of their chairs.
Yeah.
They said, what? He said, this is like the head of MTN saying, don't buy cell phones. Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, said cash will be worth nothing in 2020. So if you want my personal opinion, as opposed to Suidlanders' opinion, I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't invest in dollars. I would invest in silver. Not gold, because it's not fungible. It's very difficult. If you want to buy 6 eggs with gold, you've got to have a jeweler's scale, a microscope, and a scalpel to shave off the merest tiny piece. What will be more practical, and it has always been more practical in the history of the world during times of crisis, is silver. And there is one massive benefit now, and that is that the price of silver has been kept artificially low.
It has.
By J.P. Morgan. Four traders, including the head of the precious metals desk at J.P. Morgan headquarters, were arrested 3 weeks ago for spoofing, keeping the price of silver artificially low. And that comes after 2 previous sets of arrests over the past few months. Now is going to be the very last opportunity for anybody to buy silver at a realistic price. If you don't believe me, if you're in doubt, if you think, what the hell does that arsehole know? He's from Suidlanders now, he thinks he's a financial expert. By all means, please go and do the research that we've done. Go and see Chris Martinson's channel. Not the stuff, he's a qualified epidemiologist. He has a PhD in virology. So the videos that he's producing now are all about the coronavirus. Go and look at his previous videos. Mike Maloney's channel, The Money GPS, Main Street for Wall Street, the Atlantis Report, and the list goes on. And you will discover for yourself the mathematical, not the speculative, the mathematical evidence of what I'm telling you. Yeah, that's the best of advice I can give, but it is most certainly not Suidlanders' official policy. We are not, as an organization, qualified to give economic or financial advice. I give you my advice in response to a direct question.
Okay, now I see Jarko has put in here gold and silver is backed by the dollar, the world reserve currency, so the dollar is a safe bet. Jarko, I agree with Simon. Hang on, let me just respond to this. I know a lot about this subject. I actually have a lot of silver that I've been saving over the years, and what I've done, and Simon has got it absolutely spot on. The best way to secure your future financially is silver, because you can buy, I've got hundreds of the old South African tikkies, hundreds of them, hundreds of the old sixpences, hundreds of the old shillings, because each one has a known percentage of silver, so you can actually value it. Now, although the gold and silver price is based on the US dollar, has anyone looked at what's happened to gold and silver in the last 2 weeks? They've gone through the roof.
Yeah, gold is going through the roof.
It's going through the roof because the US dollar is losing its strength. Now, the difference between fiat currency, which is the rand coins that you've got in your pocket or you have in the bank account, is that they actually have no value. There's nothing backing them. Nothing. The only thing that backs them is the faith of the community that they can actually go and buy something with them. And also the tax base. The tax base is critical for the fiat currency. You lose your tax base and your currency, like with Zimbabwe, it goes down to zero. Now, the difference between fiat currency, which again is like the rand, the US dollar, the Australian dollar, the euro, they're all fiat currencies. They have absolutely nothing backing them. The difference between physical gold and physical silver is that the asset is in that piece of gold or that piece of silver that you are holding. That's the difference. You never lose the value. And that's why in times like this, so many people are actually investing in silver and gold, physical silver and physical gold. Simon, would you like to add to what I've just said?
Yeah, Scott, I'll try to be brief. In World War II, Europe paid for the USA support in gold. By 1944, the USA held about 2/3 of the world's gold that it had gotten from the Europeans. And in anticipation of the end of the war, the Europeans were very concerned about how they would back their currencies with precious metals, because historically all currencies were backed by money, being the stuff that you're talking about. And so the USA proposed at the Bretton Woods meeting of 1944. And what they would do is they would remain on the gold standard. In other words, they would back the dollar with gold. For every dollar in circulation, there would be an equivalent amount of gold in Fort Knox. And the European currencies would float against the dollar. In 1971, on Friday the 13th of August, Richard Nixon, Friday the 13th of August, Richard Nixon held a meeting with his top advisors, and they discussed the fact that the amount of money in circulation in the USA was exceeding the gold reserves, that they were going off the gold standard one way or the other. And rather than be pushed, they should jump. So they made the announcement that the USA would come off the gold standard on the afternoon of Sunday, the 15th of August, 1971. Since then, no currency in the world, has been backed by real money. However, what has enabled the US dollar to remain strong is something that's highly artificial and highly wrong. It's wicked, it's bad. They persuaded the Saudis, who then persuaded their mates in OPEC to only accept payment for oil with the US dollar. So anytime that South Africa or any other country in the world wants to buy oil, they have to buy dollars and give that to OPEC and the Saudis and what have you. And to change that system is immensely difficult. It's a challenge beyond challenges. Therefore, the US dollar has been kept artificially valuable through this demand from every other country in the world. Every country in the world has to beg and plead the Americans for dollars to buy fuel, right? Now, what's happening is, and this was initiated by Saddam Hussein, and it is almost certainly the explanation for the invasion of Iraq, because weapons of mass destruction, we know, is not the explanation, and it never was. Saddam Hussein initiated a process to set up an alternative exchange where people could pay in other money. That was followed by Muammar Gaddafi. We know what happened to both of them. There is a massive movement now by the Chinese and the Iranis to do the same thing. And it is speculated by some very, very intelligent people, not wacky yahoos on the periphery of the internet. Some very intelligent people, that the reason why, that look, this Wuhan virus for certain didn't come from a cat or a rat or a bat. I have on my computer the patent documents for it. It was patented in the USA in 2015. It was then lent, and this is not disputed. You can see it in the Washington Times. There's an article on this by a former Israeli Mossad guy. The coronavirus was given to the Canadians, or sold to them, or lent to them, or leased to them, or whatever it was, but it was given to a Canadian P4 laboratory. The virus was stolen by a woman professor and her husband, and you don't have to believe me, you can go and do the research. It's there.
Yeah, it is
for
there.
all of us.
Yeah, it is there. I've seen it.
It was stolen, and she was tracked by the NSA, and there are records of this that anybody can find, because as soon as they get deleted by the powers that be, somebody puts them up again. They're all over the show. There are thousands of us looking at them every day. And it was taken to China. And there, they lost control of it, or whatever happened. But there is speculation that the reason why the USA is agitating so heavily against Iran at the moment, and possibly, I don't know, I don't want to sound like a crazy guy, possibly why this massive onslaught has occurred against the Chinese economy. Morgan Stanley Bank, Scott, you probably know this, the week before last, had a very clever idea. They commissioned somebody to use satellites to assess or ascertain the amount of particulate matter in the skies above China. And the Morgan Stanley report was as follows. It is reduced by between 50 and 20%, and we believe it's closer to 20, by between 50 and 80%, and we believe that it is closer to 80% than 50%. In other words, only 20, maybe 25 or 30% of the Chinese economy is functioning. It is a catastrophe, a cataclysm of the first order. The Chinese economy has decreased year on year by 12%. It's a number unknown to mankind. It has never been seen before. And the ramifications are beyond our imagination. We will only feel those ramifications about 3 months from the beginning of January. So we are looking at, in about April, we will begin to feel the full effects of the shutdown in January. By the beginning of February, by the beginning of May, we will feel the effects of whatever happened on the 1st of February. And I don't want to go into the world of wild speculation, but this stuff that I've told you so far is recorded. The fact that it's not being told by the mainstream media doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. You can go and find it. The Pirbright Institute, I have a PDF copy of the Pirbright Institute's patent for this thing. It may be, we don't know, but it may be the case that the USA is desperately trying to protect itself against the utter destruction of its economy by these massive initiatives being undertaken by the Chinese and the Iranis. Now, I have one final comment. I haven't been able to look at the markets because we haven't had power in Van der Kloof. We have a very serious power crisis. Our power is off between 12 and 16 hours every single day. I'll look at the markets once I get off this interview. But as of the close of trading in the USA yesterday, being Thursday, the United States markets had lost $1,737 billion. And it is as a consequence of something that was warned about by the man who devised the overnight interbank repurchase agreement system, an autistic genius by the name of Zoltan Pozsar. Zoltan Pozsar has only ever written 26 public documents. He's an autistic genius. He calls them letters. Letter number 26 of the 9th of December warned that the entire global financial system that he devised, by the way, people can research this. He was a young man and he was called into a meeting to take notes.
And
they couldn't resolve a certain crisis in the US economy. And he said, hey, why don't we do this? His system, on the 9th of December, he said, it has come to an end. A couple of days later, the same Ray Dalio that I mentioned said, not at Davos, then, 9th of December, he said, it has come to an end. He said, the game is up. We have played the game of global finance right to the end. It is over. Everything is going to collapse. They've been warning about this happening immediately. They suspected that it would happen on Sunday, the 15th of December, for a very specific reason, because there was going to be a massive injection of liquidity into the markets, and they were afraid that it would crash the markets. There would be a reaction against the excess liquidity. In any case, this thing has been delayed, and it began on Monday, and we will see whether it is corrected or not. What crystal ball do I have? I have no crystal ball. But certainly, there are fundamental problems with the global economy. And I'm sorry for the very long-winded response to your generous invitation to say some more on the topic. But this is what we're confronting at the moment. This is what we're thinking about. This is what is worrying us sick at night. I had Andre Coetzee here last night, very famous guy in Suidlanders. He owns a restaurant up the road called Oppie Deck. People come from literally 3 provinces just to eat at his restaurant. And he said to me, Simon, are you not afraid that this research that you're doing is going to drive you mad? And I said to him, I am. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. But we are researching this day and night, Scott. $1.737 trillion lost, gone. And now we'll see what the markets are doing today. And this is all as a consequence of what you were talking about. It is directly related to what you said.
Now, look, just for those watching, I'm going to put in a link, and if you take that link now, you'll see what's happening to the rand, and you'll see it's dropped over 1 rand per dollar in the last 24 hours. It's now 15 rand 70 to a US dollar. It is just going down the gurgler as we talk. That's what's happening to your rand. Now, someone raised the suggestion that the gold price had dropped by a sizable percentage in the last 24 hours. Now, there's always ups and downs, but the general direction of the gold price is straight up, like with silver. Now, Philippe, you've been sitting there listening for a while. Is there anything you want to add to this subject?
Basically, guys, what I told you at the time, a month ago, whatever it was, there's an awful lot you can do to enhance and strengthen your immune system. Get plenty of sleep, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Make sure that you get your extra vitamins. The protocols that are used in China now, in Wuhan, in fact, are intravenous protocols of very high dosages of vitamin C. They're also used in Japan at the moment. That has been announced this week. There's an awful lot you can do with high doses of vitamin C, and I've read comments that you pee it out. Yes, you do, to a degree, but high serum levels of vitamin C do things to cells. I'm trying to keep it simple. They also do things to the virus. The one thing is that you are not living in a world which has only corona and nothing else. There are a lot of other diseases going around and pathogens being spread around. Panic doesn't help, but preparation does. And for example, if you get yourself a prophylactic dose of vitamin C, around 200 to 600 milligrams a day, that would help. There's some very good papers written on vitamin C that come out of the University of Helsinki. They're not idiots who write this stuff. Double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. Dr. Humila at the University of Helsinki has done a very, very comprehensive trial, which has been cited over and over and over again, published papers there. That is just a very humble, cheap little vitamin that will help you boost your immune system. Again, hygiene. Should it come to you, remember that an infection with the coronavirus is not a death sentence. Most people who will get it will recover very nicely, have very few to no symptoms at all. A few will be affected very adversely, and to the point that some of those might have a life-threatening complication. But that is the minority. it is in essence not really that different from the other things that have visited us. SARS, MERS, H1N1, the bird flu, the swine flu. We get them all the time. All of a sudden we get a particularly nasty one making its appearance, and then there is a national emergency. Have a look at how many dogs, for example, were killed off by the Chinese when they were found carrying a certain virus as well. These things happen. Make sure that your overall health is as best as you can get it. And then hygiene. Make sure that if you're worried about a pandemic whereby you will have to go to ground, that you should that become a necessity, such as in China, that you have plenty of stores, that you have drinking water, that every single thing that comes into your house is wiped down and cleaned up. If you've got pets, the pets either stay in or stay out. You don't get them to bring whatever they find on their way back into the house. Should it come to a Chinese model, then no visitors, people want to see you, Skype them. Yeah? Don't contaminate a sterile environment, a quarantine environment. And you will weather the storm.
Right.
Should someone get sick, it need not be the corona. It could be another viral or bacterial infection. You can even get both of them at the same time. Panic doesn't help.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is that your nutritional protocols, eat well, eat healthy, sleep well, sleep healthy, take your vids, prepare for the worst if you feel that it is necessary. Don't panic. And if your general health is good and you're not in the age bracket where you are at increased risk, or if you don't have immunosuppressant medication, then you are more at risk than others. But you're at risk from any seasonal flu or any bacterial infection as well, or any allergy for that matter that you may have. It is not a death sentence, guys. It's not. You can control your own resistance to a very, very, very large degree.
Okay.
But at the forefront of it all is hygiene. Hygiene.
Philippe, now I just want to interrupt. Thank you so much. That's really good advice. Really appreciate it, and that's why we love having you on the live stream. Now I just want to just say to Russ Mott just to cut it out, okay? I don't like comments like that. I'm going to remove your comment that you've put out there, and if you pass a comment like that again, you will be banned from this channel. Okay? Now, CH has asked Philippe, Scott, I've heard a lot of vitamins are full of fillers. What is the best brand?
Basically, anything that you take has fillers in it. Mostly talcum, for example.
Right.
They're bulking agents and fillers. Fillers in their own right are not necessarily a problem. Fillers you find in any medication that you take orally, such as oral antibiotics. You would have a tiny little tablet if it weren't for bulking agents and fillers. So they are not an issue. The best, the most easily absorbed vitamin C would be the liposomal ones. And when you take those liposomal ones in quantity, it doesn't quite match the IV, the intravenous absorption rate, but it comes closer than anything else. So liposomal ones will be very good. But decent. All I'm really saying, guys, is crank up your immune system, make it the best it can be.
Okay, now I have a lot of people on the side chat who are very worried about Simon's health because he smokes. What's your advice to Simon about smoking, Philippe? Because they're all saying that that's not going to help him if he gets a coronavirus.
No, it's not, because it causes respiratory distress, acute respiratory distress symptoms. But I think Simon is well aware of that. and he has made a choice to smoke rather than keep himself healthy. I've heard his voice and I've looked at his face, and he is not the man I spoke to last year. I hope you make a good and speedy recovery. One thing I would advise you against is vaping. There is a huge amount of hype about vaping, that vaping is so much healthier for you than smoking. It's not.
So what's wrong with vaping?
Is actually quite dangerous. Sorry, say again?
Why is vaping dangerous?
The liquid that is vaporized has highly carcinogenic aspects to it. Right. And also the different flavors become carcinogenic. So vaping is actually a pretty poor substitute. The best thing is to stop smoking altogether and forget about the vaping as well. There are a lot of papers produced at the moment about vaping, and none of it is very pretty. But it is a choice. It is a choice, and should corona come your way and you have an underlying lung condition, respiratory condition, you are at an increased risk.
Right.
Life is a choice.
Now, Simon, over to you. What's your response to people who are saying that you should stop smoking?
I hate smoking, Scott. I hate it. I have tried everything under the sun to stop.
Yeah. So you haven't tried the patches or these other different things?
I've tried everything that exists.
Okay. Now, we got another question to Philippe and Simon. I'm going to pose this one to Simon first. Countries are starting to restrict foreigners from entering other countries with more and more deports. Are the gates closing for South Africans? And I guess I have a addendum to that question. Wonderful hippo eyes, Cyril Ramaphosa, has suggested that tourism to South Africa is going to double by 2030. And of course it's nosediving because of crime. What do you think the impact, Simon, on what's happening to tourism in South Africa as a result of the coronavirus is going to do?
Sorry, Scott, that I'm laughing. I just want to tell you something that you may appreciate. The head of, dear me, I don't want to get this name wrong because I'm going to make a fool of you, me, and her. She is the CEO of, oh man, anyway, it's one of the global broadcast networks. I think it's called World Broadcast Network. I'm sorry, Ria, that I can't remember the right name. And I don't want to take a chance. Anyway, the CEO of World Broadcast Network is watching your channel right now. Is watching this. Very interesting, isn't that nice? He just sent me a message. Scott, your channel has grown phenomenally. I mean, it really is a phenomenon. You met, sorry that I'm digressing. You met Johan Ayers, big tycoon of this province this morning. Very humble man, but a very successful man. And he said to me on Tuesday, he said, I've stopped watching SABC2. He said, I no longer watch, I don't read News 24. He said, if I want to know the truth and to know what's happening in my country, there's only one source, and that is Scott Bolson. Anyway, so lots of people are tuning into you, Scott, lots of meaningful people. To answer your question, what do I think of the consequences or the effects upon tourism in South Africa? I think, Scott, that it is severe, and it is only one of many spheres that is going to take a tremendously hard knock. If people are interested in this, they can do some research to see how much we are the world's largest chrome producer, by far. The largest manganese producer in the world by far, the world's third largest coal exporter, and we export tremendous amounts of iron ore, and then of course diamond, 17% of the world's production, gold, still to this day more than 50% of the gold's resources, proven resources, although we are now only the 7th largest miner. If people go and have a look to see what proportion of those commodities and it extends to other things, wool, Angora goat hair, and so on. What proportion of those things is bought by Chinese businesses, bought by China, so to speak? They will appreciate that if there is a massive reduction in demand, as there is bound to be, as we will feel with a 3-month delayed effect, as I described earlier, there is a likelihood, we don't know, only our Lord knows, but there is a likelihood that our economy will be smacked unconscious over the next few months. It's not hysteria, it's not doomed profit, it is mathematics. In fact, it's not strictly speaking mathematics. Strictly speaking, it's arithmetic. It's just plus and minus. It's class 1, class 2 stuff. And tourism is among those spheres or of our economy that is liable to be severely punished.
Now, really, when we think about this, we've got a double whammy, because not only is the coronavirus probably going to be rampant throughout South Africa in 3 months, in the colder months, but we're going to also have an economy that's kind of just died. Now, that's going to be absolutely disastrous for South Africa.
Yeah, Scott, we are very concerned about it. We're not saying as much as we are tempted to say, because we don't want to sow fear and panic. You know, we have a burden of responsibility as Suidlanders because of our role, because we have assumed the mantle of the leaders in preparing for and coping with a civil war, which is an unheard of thing. Who does that? We have a burden of responsibility that is far, far greater than the average burden of responsibility. Not to cause panic, not to get people terrified and have them overreacting. So much of what I've said tonight is stuff that I will possibly regret saying after this interview. It may already be inciting some fear amongst people, but we're not speaking speculatively. We are speaking on the basis of facts, figures, data, and statistics. If, for argument's sake, we produce, let's say, or we sell to the world, we're the world's 3rd largest coal exporter. Let's say we sell $1 billion of coal a year. And let's say, for argument's sake, 50% of that coal is bought by China. That's $500 million. And let's say that Scott Minor or Guggenheim Partners estimates of the reduction of the Chinese economy now, and Dr. Nouriel Roubini, very famous, supremely intelligent man, did an interview with Bloomberg on this today, in which he endorsed Guggenheim Partners' estimate. Let's say it's a reduction of 12% in the Chinese economy, minimum. And let's say Morgan Stanley is correct when they say that about 80% of the Chinese economy is not functioning right now.
Yeah. And
you take out 80% of our coal revenue, 400 million of $500 million over a year. So we don't know how long this thing is going to last. 1 month, 2, 3, 6, 9. Dr. Chris Martinson, the epidemiologist, says that technically speaking, using the quadratic modeling, I don't even know what I'm saying, I'm regurgitating like a parrot. Using quadratic modeling, the coronavirus cannot technically peak in China until the last week of April, the first week of May, maybe later. So the virus is only going to get worse between now and then, assuming that he's correct, and he provides the evidence, he provides the maths, the graphs, the statistics, the whole lot. Assuming that this thing is going to get worse until the end of April, and then plateau, and then decline. We will only know how bad it is for us by the end of May, June, July. So there's every possibility, Scott, that this thing could have a 6 or 9 month effect upon our economy. And if we lose for argument's sake, 500 or $400 million of revenue here, and $350 million of revenue there, and $750 million of revenue in the next place, according to the mathematics, not sucked out of our thumbs, then there is a realistic possibility that this double whammy is going to be something that we never ever dreamed of. Only the Lord knows. But for now, there is a reason to be concerned. It's like as if a man from the US Geological Survey is your brother-in-law, and he phones you while you're at the beach on holiday in December, and he says there is a massive tsunami sweeping across the Indian Ocean. It's going to drown all of you. You jump in your car on Durban beachfront, and you race up to the Drakensberg. You discover 8 hours later that the tsunami beat it out, and there was no threat. But the guys from the US Geological Survey, they have those underwater sensors, submarine sensors. Where are you going to take your advice from? The reason we're concerned is because there is scientific and mathematical advice which justifies our concerns. But only God knows, not Suidlanders. Only God knows how badly this thing will turn out. It is our opinion, however, until God reveals His perfect will, that we should be alert. We should, at the very least, jump in the car and drive up to Westville, Porters Hill, Pinetown.
Okay. No,
I hope that the metaphor is helpful.
I totally get what you're saying. Now, Suidlanders bases a lot of its philosophy on Sinef and Rensburg, and you might or might not be aware that I'm actually every week now taking a chapter out of the book which actually talks about Sinef's visions, and it's amazing the
I have no
comments.
idea.
If you go to Loving Life 2020 channel, you'll see I've got a playlist now which is Sinef and Rensburg, and chapter 1 is already out there. A lot of people are commenting. Chapter 2 we're doing on Monday. It's going to take a year to go through the whole book. But
Wow.
what we're doing is we're providing a platform where people can actually put in their comments and thoughts and respect a general view of people about what he is saying when he has all these visions and prophecies and so on.
Yeah.
So that's actually on the Loving Life 2020 channel if you want to go and have a look at it later. Now, Philippe, you've been very quiet in the background, and I want to direct this question to you. Look.
In the notification of the government notices to travellers by the UK and the US keeps tourists out. The state of hospitals and healthcare, which has collapsed. So if somebody gets sick or has a bad accident and they get really crap service, that doesn't keep them out. I think that people either ignore it or don't really check the information and just keep coming anyway. Remember also, Scott, that for years already, when you enter South Africa at Oliver Tambo or in Durban, I do both, there is somebody standing there as you come off the plane with a thermal camera to check your body temperature. And that has been there for years before Corona was even a whisper.
Right.
That was due to another viral outbreak that was basically running around the world and killing people and hurting people and caused quite a bit of upset. It didn't stop anybody from coming into South Africa. So those things have been around forever, and people ignore them until something happens to them. Not, as I said, not even the crime rate, the rampant crime rate, the collapsed hospital services, health services, keeps them out. And a lot of tourists that we get are elderly, and they may well have to go to hospital or get medical attention, and yeah, they ignore it. They're quite happy the way things are.
Philippe,
I think until there is outright emergency, people will just keep traveling. And when there is an emergency, the airlines will stop flying.
Philippe, I have
That's my take.
I have to tell you, I totally disagree with you. I can tell you that here in Australia, or in Australia and New Zealand Airlines for the first time in many, many, many years has declared that it's going to suffer at least a $35 million loss because of cancellations of people traveling to New Zealand. Now, New Zealand is probably one of the safest countries in the world. And earlier we were talking about logistics and the importance of logistics. The problem with the South African government, you look at South African Airways, they fudged their figures. In fact, they didn't even put in their audited reports in 2018 and 2019. And it's now becoming clear to auditors as to why they didn't, because all their contracts actually didn't have contracts. They were just money being paid out to their mates. The BEE system. And this is why South African Airways was trying to cover up what actually was going on. Now, regardless, think about South African Airlines. Their planes are empty now. No one's flying on South African Airways. I've seen photos of planes flying from London to Johannesburg where there's only one person on the plane. It's like, I've got a glorified taxi from London to Johannesburg. That's how bad it has become. Now, when you talk about tourism and the coronavirus, it's having a huge impact on tourism around the world. Absolutely phenomenal impact. And South Africa, when you add in the criteria of crime that more and more people are realizing because they're now starting to talk about it in overseas papers, even though they're kind of being pulled, kicking and shouting to try and not report on what's going on in South Africa. Some papers now are. I have so many people emailing me who are saying, whoa, we were thinking of coming to South Africa, but now we know.
Scott, I've flown recently KLM.
Yeah.
I've flown BA, and I've flown Emirates. Emirates is my favorite airline because it flies straight into Durban, and BA does as well. Those planes were full.
Yeah.
So
air traffic is because people don't want to be on planes with other people, and so they issued a massive cautionary note. They're reducing the number of flights, etc., not to South Africa and not from China or into China, in Europe. And there was an article, I believe, yesterday morning.
Hang on, Philippe, wait.
They reported that usually the Chinese presence at a certain conference in Cape Town is 20%, and there were no Chinese.
Simon,
I don't know. It's very contradictory.
Do I think that Corona has
over to you,
has an effect on tourism in South Africa? Well, the planes that I've been on have been full. We can often not get the plane, the date that we want because there are no seats. We fly business class generally, and that is just the way it is. I don't think that people are kept away by Corona in South Africa as things stand. Not even the crime rate is keeping them away when it comes to European tourism.
Philippe, again, I must disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. And this is in the. Hang on, Philippe. This was an article in the local Australian paper just yesterday. They said because of the coronavirus and because of so many cancellations, Qantas, this is the Australian airline, very highly respected airline, Qantas has reduced its ticket prices from Brisbane to Los Angeles and back to $800 return, and from Brisbane to London or Heathrow and back to $1,000. Now, I've flown Brisbane to Los Angeles several times in the last few years, and the cheapest flight I could get was nearly $2,000 return. That's how much the airlines are reducing their prices because they're trying to attract passengers onto planes. That's the coronavirus. That's a fact. I mean, it was in the paper yesterday in Australia.
I don't know about the Australian model. I know about the European model, and people here are traveling. They're even traveling to. We've had cases in the Canary Islands. People are traveling to the Canary Islands. We've had cases in Italy. People are flying in and out of Italy. We've had 5 cases out of all cases in France. People fly to France. We've had 3 cases in Germany. People fly to Germany.
But I think that'll change.
The number is so small as to not necessarily making an impact.
Anyway,
not
look,
here anyway.
That's really, we're going slightly off the subject. Why don't we revisit this subject in a couple of months' time? Because by then the impact will be clear. Now, let's get back to the subject. Simon, we've been talking now for 2.5 hours, so I don't want to... We still got well over 400 people watching. I don't know why, because it's getting really late in South Africa. But good on you guys for sticking with us. Now, before I do raise this point, I have a question for Simon from Gerard de Klerk. He says, we have no funds to stock up or flee. What about people like us?
Scott, you know, this subject comes up periodically, and it's a difficult subject, because the only sensible answer is the answer that nobody wants to hear. You know, they want to hear us. I'm not disparaging Gerard. Don't get me wrong, Gerard. Please don't. But people want to hear that you're going to send a helicopter just for them. And $10 million for a cheap helicopter of any size and capacity. That you have $100 million and you have 1,000 helicopters just waiting to, because you would need that many. There is nothing we can do. It is not humanly possible for us to suck out of our thumbs the billions of rand it would cost for enough buses, not to mention the men to defend those buses, to send a bus to every old age home, every orphanage, every hospital, and every poor suburb of South Africa. Not billions, hundreds of billions. Just do the maths. Do the mathematics. 70 people on a bus, a white population of 4.7 million people, an estimated number of this many who haven't prepared. Do the maths. It is not even remotely feasible. I'm sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. But we have to stick to our guns and say to people, you have to prepare. You have to. And don't tell us that you can't afford it, because maybe Gerard wasn't here at the beginning of the show. A 10-kilogram bag of mealie meal on special now in macro for 50 Rand will produce 160 large portions. 160 large portions. So for 100 Rand, you can guarantee yourself 320 meals. If you're 4 people in your family, 320 divided by 4 is 80. You can guarantee that your family will survive with enough basic nutrition, enough starch, enough staple, enough long-chain carbohydrates for almost 3 months. 100 Rand. 100 Rand. That is an obstacle to nobody. That is not even an obstacle to people on social grants. And I don't say that disparagingly. I have said on this channel previously that when I started prepping, I was in a severe financial crisis. I lost everything, and I was at one point, a little bit successful. Through 3 or 4 events in a short span of time, I lost everything. And I went to live in a shack in somebody's back garden without a toilet, without running water, without a kitchen, and with both the ceiling and the roof missing on part of the shack. And even I could prepare. Even I could spend 15 Rand on a can of tuna, which by the way I still have. And then the next month I thought, sure, but I managed. Let me buy, instead of spending 15 Rand, I'll buy 2 liters of oil. At the time, I think it was 25, 30 rand. 2 liters of oil, 30 bucks. Do you know that if you have 2 liters of cooking oil with you in a camp full of people who have nothing, you'll be like a millionaire. Fleeing is difficult if you're in a wheelchair, or if you only have one small little car that's 40 years old and can barely run, and you've got 6 people in your family. Yes, we are sensitive to this. We're not hard-hearted people, and we know that sometimes it's easier said than done. But we also know that sometimes the guy who says, I've only got a skateboard, but damn it all, I'm going to grease the bearings in the skateboard, is the guy who you discover a year down the line got a little motorbike from his brother-in-law, and then he welded 2 panniers on the side at work, and all of a sudden he's ahead of the curve, far from being way behind the curve. This dog poor guy, unemployed, or very poorly employed, and there is such a case, by the way. It came up recently on one of the big Suidlanders groups. This guy bragged about how he was so poor, this, that, the next thing, but he put this bike together, this motorbike, and it looks spiffing. It's got panniers, and it's got spare fuel, and it's got an HF radio, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely magnificent. A guy in Cape Town, I think Tafelsig. So you've just got to do it. And if you do it, God helps those who help themselves. You've just got to do it.
Okay, now, thanks, Simon. Mel's just said here, Johan Hugo, my husband's company, also put out a travel ban an hour ago. Now, Mel is in Ireland. So more and more companies are actually preventing their staff from traveling, which again is going to have a huge impact on planes and flights and tourism. That's happening as we speak. Now, what I'd like to do, because we've been talking now for well over 2.5 hours, and I know it's getting late in South Africa. What I'd like
I haven't had my dinner yet.
You're doing very well. You've had a few smokers, though, Simon.
It's hardly a substitute.
Yeah. Now, okay, so just to close off the live stream, which I think has been very informative, and I hope people have learnt a lot from it, and please share this live stream with people all over the place, because it's a very, very important and topical subject, and the live stream will be kept on this channel, so you can actually put the link into Facebook, you can put it into Twitter, you can put it wherever you like. And if you feel so inclined, please do join Suidlanders, because I always say this, at least they've got a plan B. You will find Suidlanders joining link directly below this video. Now, I'm going to pose this question to Philippe first. Philippe, in closing, what is your message to people who are listening to this video now and later? And not only that, what is your prediction about how South Africa will look in 6 months' time, taking into account the coronavirus and the implications globally?
6 months' time. Well,
Yes, sorry.
Carry on, Philippe.
Don't you forget it, Simon. Basically, I'm waiting with bated breath for what is going to happen with Moody's. Moody's is going to have a huge impact on capital flight and investment confidence, and possibly things like employment. And employment basically means people having money in their pocket to feed themselves, shelter. So the Moody's thing is foremost on my mind at the moment. The changes in South Africa are not going to be caused by us, by whites. We've been sitting on the fence since 1994, and that's about it. The changes, if any, are going to be caused by the black people. We're sitting on the sidelines. I don't know in how far the black South Africans have had enough of the ANC, the plunder, the incompetence, the corruption. So far, we get a couple of knee-jerk reactions, but nothing really significant. They've been protesting, they've been burning tires, they've been destroying the odd building here and there for years. There's nothing new, and it's not really any worse than what it was. But I think once the black South Africans have had enough at all levels, in numbers, in significant numbers, that may drive a change in South Africa, and perhaps, but I don't know, hold out much hope for that. They may get a meritocracy involved where the best person basically does the job. If you can find them, because most of those have left, they're gone. So your human capital is exhausted. People have put up with declining standards in health, and if this government goes ahead with the NHI, whatever is left of it will collapse. Whatever is competent will leave in droves. We've got stacks and stacks and stacks of South African specialists and GPs and medical staff such as lab people, and the lab people are very important, physios and what have you. They're coming over in droves. With
Right.
the Brexit situation having been sorted out now, it is way easier to get into the UK than ever before, and people are making use of it. So I think a lot of expertise that is critical for maintaining a standard of living and a standard of health, critical people will leave because they can come here if they want to. It's now based on a point system which is very similar to what you have in Australia,
Right.
Scott. I think that the decline in policing standards will simply continue. I tried to get hold of Durban North. They've got a couple of telephone numbers, each of which went unanswered for about an hour and a half. Then I found out that they blame cable theft for the fact that their telephones don't work. And you can't get hold of them. And that has been 4 months now. That is not something that happened yesterday. That's 4 months. I think the general policing standards will collapse. The opportunistic killing of farmers and attacking of farmers by scum will continue. It may get worse. That is in itself not a civil war. It is just very regrettable, and it is downright awful. I lived in an area which was very dangerous, the Diepsloot Menandi area. I know firsthand what it is like to have farm attacks. I don't think that will change. I think that South Africa will basically decline further and further and further in its standards. I think if you extrapolate that, it will probably have a year or two left, 3 years left before it becomes totally unlivable. There has been absolutely no effort made by anyone to recover any money that has been looted. Billions have been looted and could be put to good use if it were simply reclaimed. It isn't. There is no political will to even start that process. So repair jobs on the infrastructure will not happen. I don't see an all-out civil war because I don't think that the majority of black people are inclined to participate in a civil war. They weren't prepared to do it in the 80s and the early 90s. And I don't think that the same type of people who simply want to pay a mortgage, get their kids in and out of school and hold on to a job, are inclined to start raiding white suburbs. In fact, most of them live there anyway now. I don't think that is going to happen in a hurry. The standards of public protection from the army and from the police are virtually non-existent. So I think, should it come to an uprising somewhere along the line that might affect whites, the defense of your life and what it is in your own hands. And I actually think that we should be out of Dodge years ago. to try and get out of Dodge then is a non-event. What I think is also going to happen is a collapse of the banking system. And that is a very serious situation. Should Ramaphosa go ahead with his EWC, and should that become a reality?
I agree.
Because the banks are evaluated, are rated internationally, and when a bank's book, its assets, are basically diminished or have collapsed because of all the write-offs that they have to do in terms of EWC, then their secured and unsecured loan portfolio ratio goes through the floorboards. And when that happens, the exposure by foreign banks that they allow to South African banks will be reduced commensurately. And that basically shuts them down. The ability to do business as a bank will be shut down because all of a sudden their ratios will be absolutely horrendous. Once that happens, things like bank guarantees, letters of credit, and that are given not only for individual entrepreneurs, but also intercompany ones and even international ones. All of that will collapse because they're no longer underwritten by a bank. A bank will give a guarantee based on assets that are secured in its favor.
Exactly.
When those assets fall away, they're going to withdraw the guarantee because they can no longer honor it. Mm. And I think the effect of a banking collapse, an all-round banking collapse, because nobody will be exempt. I mean, the Land Bank is already declared insolvent, I believe, and another bank as well, another major bank. Once that goes ahead, that is when Ramaphosa has basically kicked the chair from under the country, and it will be the end of it. You can't simply operate a business anymore. You can't do international transactions, trade. All of it is gone. And it doesn't look like he is letting up on the EWC story altogether. And that I think, if that continues with the next few months, that will basically be a death sentence, but because of the bank collapse and by implication the collapse of business, people's ability to do business, people's ability to get guarantees for transactions for production processes that are supported by assets, all of that will fall away. And I think that is going to be that will be the herald of a total collapse. But in the next 6 months, I think it will be pretty much a sliding scale as we've seen it now. I don't think that there's going to be a flash. I don't see it.
Well, just I need to just say to everybody watching this video that the reason I have Philippe on with these live streams is because he is an incredibly intelligent and incisive person. I mean, I've known Philippe for well over a year now, and amongst some of his expertise, he's also done the whole business side of things. What exactly are you a member of, Philippe, when it comes to the directors in South Africa? There's some particular organization.
I'm a fellow of the South African Institute of Directors. I've done an MBA years ago, and it was a particularly good one. I learned a hell of a lot. And financial instruments and the importance of a healthy banking system, a credit system, and financial constructions, and intercompany constructions, and international intercompany constructions were part of my training. And I learned a lot, and a lot of it came back when I saw the idiocy of the EWC and the undermining of the securities held by the banks.
Right. Now, the reason
I think Moody's will be well aware of the implications in terms of the international banking community, and so are they. They must be talking to each other now, reducing their exposure.
Yeah. Now, the reason I raise this is because, you know, your input is so valued. Now, the rand at the moment, I'll just tell you, it's like a flat line going down. It's now 15 rand 62 per US dollars. That's where it is right now, if you go to that link that I put in earlier in this channel. Now, Simon, I want to hand over to you. What's your thoughts about where is South Africa going to be in 6 months' time? What do you see? If you had a crystal ball, what would you see?
Scott, I think this is going to be my last contribution, if you don't mind.
It's been a long night.
Been 4 hours since we began with the sound check at 7 p.m. Scott, it's very difficult to speculate, but there are a number of salient threats on the horizon of South Africa. That is indisputable. As Philippe rightly pointed out, if we are downgraded by Moody's, then pension funds by law, and there are many pension funds invested in South Africa in the spirit of the new South Africa Rainbow Nation, the university pension funds out of the USA, etc., etc., etc. By law, we'll have to take their money out. So it's not if there will be a problem if Moody's downgrades us. There will, as a matter of legal fact, be a massive problem, because there will be massive capital outflows dictated by law. That's one. The economic effects of the coronavirus are another. The economic effects of in other words, the economic effects of the coronavirus in China, Chinese market, Chinese economy, and the trade with South Africa, particularly in commodities. Quite separately, there is a threat from the US, the apparent incipient crash of the US stock markets. Because, like when you watch those videos about some guy who's lost in the snow for 3 days, on History Channel or National Geographic, they always tell you the human body protects itself by withdrawing blood from the extremities to keep the brain and the heart alive, In the same way, the big investors of the world will obviously withdraw money from emerging markets and small markets and goodwill markets, where they've invested money just because it was the right thing to do, the Rainbow Nation, this kind of thing, in order to protect themselves back home. There is also a salient threat by expropriation without compensation. If it kicks off, as they are promising that it will, sooner or later, some Badonna de farmer is going to shoot somebody. And that will be a spark that will ignite a conflagration, or certainly some level of direct conflict by main force. There is also a threat to the South African economy again by the National Health Insurance Initiative.
Oh, that's a disaster.
They are talking, again, they spoke about 20%, then they said it's only 6%. They're talking now about 20% of all pension fund contributions being obliged by law to be invested in civil projects in South Africa. Now, if the money from some pension funds is used to build a bridge, will you please tell me how that is going to generate a return on investment?
It isn't.
Right. So that means that 20% of all of South Africa's pension funds will no longer deliver a return. That will kick us between the legs. Excuse me if you think I'm being coarse and crass, but actually I'd like to use much stronger language. It will kick us between the legs in a way the News 24 and Report and Beeld and the Natal Mercury and the Daily News are not even beginning to suggest. But it's maths. It's not me, it's maths. If 20% is not delivering a return, then 20% is not delivering a return. It will wreck the South African economy, because so much of South Africa's economy is built on pension funds. You can do the research on it. Similarly, the government has said that the Government Employees Pension Fund, GEPF, will assume the loan, assume the debt, the 190 billion rand debt of Eskom. The Government Employees Pension Fund holds about 1.3 trillion rand in assets. So, between a sixth, that is, a sixth is 16, if you prefer percent, is 16.67%. Around about a sixth, a little bit less than a sixth. Call it 15% of the Government Employees Pension Fund is also not going to deliver a return anymore.
But Simon,
this is not this is end of the world stuff.
Simon, what about the 250 billion rand that the government pension fund has been told to put into Eskom as well, on top of that?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The Government Employees Pension Fund is going to be directed to invest 190 billion, this is the latest figure, by assuming Eskom's debt. So all of a sardine, overnight, 15%. And the Deputy Minister was questioned on this. Will there be an ROI somehow? Will that money, 1/6 of the entire pension fund, will it create wealth? And she said, no. They're going to stop there and then. Can you believe this? That the numbers are involved are fantastic. I'm half falling asleep. I'm so tired because I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning, and it's been a long, hot day in front of Tour. But when you get me onto this subject, Scott, I don't understand how people are not getting this. This is life and death, Scott. Not because I say so, but because it's damn mathematics.
Well, what I can't understand.
Racist. It's got nothing to do with Suidlanders. It's maths, man.
Yeah, what I can't understand, Simon, is the fact that you've got the Kasatu mob who are up in arms about losing employment jobs at Eskom when they can't make the connection. The reason why Eskom is going down the gurgler is because they've got about 50% more staff than they need, and they're all sitting on their backsides doing nothing. And now to keep Eskom afloat, they're now attacking the pension fund. Then there's a complete disconnect. What do you think about that?
Yes, Scott, this is the parallel universe that we live in which nothing makes any sense. You know, Eskom says, we're not selling enough, right? Why are we short of money? We didn't sell the amount of electricity we hoped to sell last year. And the very next day they issue that directive telling people not to use too much electricity. It's too much for your mind, Scott. And you know what? Really, Scott, I don't mean to be unkind or ungenerous, but there is a certain madness in communism, a certain inherent contradiction. And if anybody's in any doubt, any of the people watching this, about what is happening in South Africa, I urge you, I plead with you, with the tears streaming down my cheeks, search Dr. Frans Cronje's talk on the Renegade Report on Cliff Central. And there you will see the best, or hear the best analysis of what is happening in South Africa done by anybody. But if you want to go deeper, Google Dr. Anthea Jeffrey's presentation to the Free Market Foundation. It's on YouTube. They lay this thing wide open. It is a communist plot, not because I say so, crazy, passionate, worked up, racist Simon, but because they provide documentary evidence from within the African National Congress that demonstrates that they are specifically committed to the National Democratic Revolution, and it includes the utter destruction of the economy in order to dispossess the owners of the economy, to force them to relinquish the dust that remains so that they can pick up the pieces for themselves. Go and have a look if you don't believe me. So there's this madness that prevails. You know, Scott, we're having up to 16 hours a day of ongoing electricity blackouts in Van der Kloof. Can you believe the reason? And it's only our village, which is overwhelmingly white. The other two villages in our municipality, namely Philipstown and Pietersville, which are overwhelmingly black, are not having any power cuts. You know what the irony is? That the whites are fully paid up.
Yeah.
But we're using too much electricity. This is honestly what they've said. You're going over the peak, so we're going to cut you off for 16 hours. It's so incredible. It's too much for your mind, but we have to get used to this. They will use perversity to destroy us. And there is good evidence for it if people are willing just to do the research. Go and listen to Dr. Frans Cronje and Dr. Anthea Jeffrey expose this thing with the ANC's own documents.
Yeah.
They are devoted to destroying us, and we must stop worrying about it so much. You know, people say, can't they see what they do? It's deliberate, guys. Get used to it.
It's a boiling frog syndrome.
Yeah, it is a deliberate tactic. And we're heading down a very rough road. There are numerous threats to South Africa, which are existential in nature. They are existential threats. We are liable to be utterly destroyed in this country over the next 6 months or year or 18 months if each of those threats that we have identified is indeed fully realized.
Okay, Simon, I don't want you to drop dead with a heart attack or fall asleep at the wheel. In a very short verbal paragraph, tell us where you see South Africa in 6 months' time. I think we've lost. I think we've lost Simon. All right, guys. Look, I just want to say thank you all so much for. Yeah, he's lighting up. Isn't that a great stuck photo? I just want to thank you all for being part of the live stream tonight. Remember, we are doing another live stream hopefully over the weekend. Marlena's setting that up for us with Simon Root, who's the fellow who looks after rhinos, and that's why we're selling the rhino painting, and we have a bid of 20,000 Rand on that already. So yeah, lost smoke, Lawrence says. Okay, and Philippe, I just want to say thank you so much to you for being with us tonight. I know it was a last minute thing, but I really appreciate your input and involvement.
Pleasure.
All right, and to the people who've been watching tonight, thank you so much for being part of the show, and to my moderators. There's several moderators here. All of you guys really rock. You know, you're really keeping control of everything. And please have a lovely evening, and I will see you over the weekend with our next live stream. Okay, guys, take care. And I'm just about to...
Night, everybody.
You want to say cheers to everybody, Philippe? The stage is yours.
Night, everybody. Stay healthy.
Take your vitamins.
Yeah, boy.